So welcome everyone to the monthly virtual gathering of the Canadian Ecopsychology Network. Hello, my name is Carol Koziel and I'm the founder of CEN. Today we're going to have a presentation from Jack Adam Weber. Jack is a Chinese medicine clinician with over 20 years experience. He is also a climate activist, organic farmer, and celebrated poet. Jack has authored hundreds of articles, thousands of poems, and several books, including his latest, Climate Cure, Heal Yourself to Heal the Planet. Jack, thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us today, and the airwaves are yours.
All right. So we'll keep an eye on the time. I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm speaking to you from Ojai, California. I think I want to begin just by saying that frequently when I talk or speak or present, I'll pause, and I just connect into my body and allow the next step to come. And I think that's a great metaphor for us as we live in our modern world that's constantly fast-paced and lack that bit of self-reflection. So people are often confused by that. So I just want to share that. Because this is an eco-psychology presentation, I took sort of most of the information from a chapter in the book titled The Yin and Yang of Emotional Intelligence. And then I think I'm going to weave other aspects of the book and then parts of the book that haven't even been presented yet into that discussion. So I just wanted to begin with a poem. And this is a poem that I wrote in Hawaii when I was building my house out there. And I'll get into a little bit of story about living in Hawaii and how it informed writing the book. So the poem is titled Roommate. Today, while brushing off the walls of my half-built home, I happened upon, as we all have in similar ways, a small spider scrambling through the dust pile. After a few tries, I located its invisible lifeline, half buried in the debris. And in the time between carefully lifting its delicate, translucent body from peril to the safety of a higher perch, the world flashed before my eyes. The plundering of the Amazon basin, millions of pounds of fake fertilizer phosphates leaching into the Gulf of Mexico, invasive species overtaking the Everglades, refugees fleeing terror, spoiled ground, and fisheries. Pulling myself from contemplation, I busily finished cleaning, appointments, money, and other worries still heckling my sanity, threatening the delivery of justice, nearly precluding time enough to care in this small corner of my house we all share, called home. So I've never read that poem publicly, and I chose it today because I think that spider we can all relate to. And as we watch the world crash down around us, I think we all need to find that spider in our lives, both as a metaphor for our own self-care and our care for the natural world. And I'll say that having founded the chapter of Extinction Rebellion here in Ojai and been working diligently with that group over the last couple years, we have a small progressive town here in Ojai and lots of green initiatives and green minds and hearts here. And I've watched how plodding and slow and frustrating it is to get climate initiatives going, even in a small progressive town. And it's been exciting in ways, and it's also been really disheartening because I extrapolate that to the bigger world, and I see how slowly things are progressing. So when it comes down to, the sense of anxiety or the sense of terror, the sense of dread that we all feel, there's this sort of juxtaposition of doing what we can in our individual lives and never feeling like that's enough, and then wanting to, go with the federal government and get changes done right away. And obviously that doesn't happen. It's hard to happen even here in Ojai. So this dynamic of the personal, right, the microcosm and the macrocosm is some of what we'll talk about here today. And the spider poem, the roommate poem, brings up this aspect of care. And as I began to contemplate writing the book more than 6 years ago, I am a radical kind of person, and I like digging down into the roots of things and trying to get at what really is at the foundation of our dysfunction. And I realized that one of the primary things that we need, and that I share about in the first couple chapters of the book, is this sense of care. And so what does it take for us to care, right? If you don't care, you're not going to care about the world. You're not going to self-motivate. You're not going to organize with others. And you're not going to try to clean up your own life. So in my own experience, I went through some pretty intense psychotherapy in my 20s, depth psychotherapy, somatic-oriented psychotherapy, and always had a very deep connection with nature. So I lived in Santa Barbara, and I'd spend a lot of my time in nature. I was teaching yoga at the time and doing body work. And when I went into therapy, I uncovered so much grief in myself, and grief that I didn't even know was there. And I think that was at the age of 26. And before then, I remember that I was a pretty angry person. And I cried more in those intense 3 years of body-centered psychotherapy than I ever had in my whole life. And my heart busted open, my poetry came out of me like it never had before. And I was in a period of revelation, in a sense, and intense pain. And when I came through that process, that deep death and rebirth process, I realized that I wasn't as angry anymore. I had a lot more compassion. I had a lot more softness. And that stint of grief work was shape-shifting, life-changing for me. And I realized through my own experience that the very profound importance of grief work in our lives. And what I experienced, getting back to the care aspect, is that the grief work allowed me to care. It allowed me to care a lot more. And as we'll explore, there's some dynamics in Chinese medicine with the metaphors that I'll share that help show the dynamic between grief and anger and how those two are intimately related, as well as joy and fear. So, so the book was born out of contemplating care, and that's what the first couple chapters are about. And then I began to ask another question. I said, well, besides working through our pain, which was primary for me, what else do we need to care? And I realized that a relationship with the natural world is essential. And as I posted just recently on social media, this aspect of personal relationships, so that when we have a personal relationship with an aspect of our environment, we care about that environment. And in the book, I share a couple studies out of Berkeley and Stanford showing that when children are exposed to nature, when children are allowed to be in nature and begin to feel it and be affected by it, they grow up caring more about the natural world and about environmentalism. And it also affects how people vote, voting for nominees that take care of the environment or don't take care of the environment. So it's it's important to get out of the cerebral sphere and get into the natural world, as most of us know here. And so I just bring that home in the sense that, so we have this care, right? And psychotherapy often is just about how we care about ourselves. And, you know, as I've learned from Linda and, you know, from my own experiences as well, that therapy really has to go beyond the individual. And I think eco-psychology is a wonderful way of understanding the holistic dynamic of what psychology means and what our own healing means. And I discuss this in the book as well, that you know, if we're just working on ourselves, it's just a personal indulgence project. And what I've experienced through my own work of therapy and healing and grief work is that from that, I'm reborn, and I'm reborn to care, and it breaks my heart open as wide as the world, so that I care about everything else tremendously. And that segues into when I first started learning about climate crisis, before I started writing the book. It was so distressing for me. And like a lot of people, I learned about the crisis initially and how bad it was through Guy McPherson's work. And so I remember that was in Hawaii, and I went into a period of depression, not clinical depression per se, but I was really, really broken. And that went on for at least a couple months or so. And then I sort of graduated from that. I transitioned from that. I got tremendously interested in activism again and environmentalism again, even though I was doing a lot of work in Hawaii. And so I began to contemplate still, you know, this aspect of care. So we have so far this aspect of self-healing and then a connection with the natural world. And then I realized that we need a sense of community, that we're wired, right? Our neurobiology is wired evolutionarily to be with one another, to care about one another, to work together. So these three things are what I call a triangle of resilience. I call them our triangle of resilience relationships. So working on oneself, being with the natural world in an embodied, loving, caring, you know, passionate state, and with one another. So I just, I wanted to just read a quick little paragraph here from the book about this. This is from the first chapter, and this is when I was contemplating what propels us to be able to care enough. So I say, our collective inaction has propelled me to wonder what allows us to willfully, even nonchalantly, march towards collapse and our own demise. I have meditated on this question for years, searching for radical etiology or root cause for our folly. Even if we address the numerous cognitive biases with which evolution and cultural conditioning have wired us, we still haven't answered what it would take to empower enough of us to sufficiently care for the natural world and our own survival. We lack a strategy for how to care, even enough to learn why we don't care enough. We are still without a roadmap for how to become inwardly, and for many, marginalized, also outwardly resourced enough, and therefore fulfilled enough to do without many of the superfluities that exacerbate our Sasquatch-sized carbon footprints and perpetuate our complacency. So that's a lead into this triangle of resilience that I talk about. And as a Chinese medicine clinician, you know, it's sort of emblazoned into my bones the dynamic of yin and yang. And Carol, if you could just show the yin and yang symbol real quick, I'd like to just kind of jump into that. That's the first image here. Okay, so if you look at this image here, this is the ancient Chinese were also an indigenous culture, and they still are. And this symbol is a perennial symbol of eco-psychological wisdom. This symbol is the integration of light and dark. This symbol means that the white, which is yang, and the black, which is yin, are intimately dependent upon one another and mutually support one another. So this symbol came out of the Chinese sages, just observation of the natural world, that there was dark and light, there was hot and cold, there was inner, there was outer. So a lot of people don't really understand this symbol deeply, and I'm going to really, the heart of this presentation is about the symbol and its extrapolation into the 5 phases and how that relates to our inner lives and how we interface with the world. So I think that most of us these days are wondering, what we can, Linda, Carol, you can take this down, please. Thanks. We're wondering, how can we take care of ourselves and how can we take care of the world? And I think that works 2 ways, so that personal distress and the collective distress we see outwardly either drive us further into fear or stimulate us to rise to the challenge of personal healing and collective healing. And so obviously the position that I present and advocate is the healing path, so that we can see all the events that occur in the world trigger us in ways that also trigger our own traumas and our own past and our own healing, our own grief, our own anxiety, our own fear. And so engaging with the world, engaging with climate crisis, and some of the educators that have spoken, I think, I heard, how can we get people interested in this? And I think one of the ways is that unfortunately we live in a selfish culture, and part of that bridge is presenting something that's selfish to people, right? And that selfishness, without a pejorative connotation necessarily, is our own healing, right? So that by presenting that we have this inner-outer dynamic, which can trigger us, which can stimulate us to our own work, our own integration, our own sense of wholeness, as well as address and face the world that we're living in, right? So we don't shy away from the world and we don't shy away from ourselves. And unfortunately, what's happened is that many people have shied away from themselves. We live with a tremendous amount of unconscious trauma. And I think that whether it's the climate crisis or the COVID crisis or the political crisis, or any of the other crises we're facing, this causes people to shut down even further. And so I think a lot of it has to begin in supporting people to work with their own pain, work with their own grief. And the beauty of grief is that it helps clear our pain, right? It's I've called it the polisher of the soul, so that we're not lugging around all this trauma and all this grief and pain, which blocks our heart. It causes what I call encrustations around our heart. And when we clear some of this pain and support others to work through their pain and to create social movements and institutions and policies that actually support mental health and make it available, good psychotherapy, good somatic work, good ecotherapy for everybody, then we can begin to heal as a culture. And we begin to heal individually through our compassion and our connection, our neurobiology of we, as Dan Siegel, the psychiatrist, calls it. So this aspect of grief work, this aspect of working through our pain, was always to me obviously a death and rebirth experience, right? So when I would go through my pain, and when I've worked with other people to encounter their pain and their grief and their trauma, it's like you die in a way, and you re-encounter this horrible pain, and the solution is to be with it, is to be with that pain. And it takes a lot of emotional intelligence to work with that pain in that way, so that we aren't stuffing it and we aren't bypassing it. We're being with it, and through that process, it's a natural rebirth process. And this yin yang symbol is a symbol of regeneration. It's from darkness. It's from pain into the light. And okay, so Carol, if you could show the picture, I don't know which one it is, but it's of the Earth at the center image. Okay, so you can see the yin yang symbol here. Okay, and this is the metaphor, the symbol of death and rebirth. So in this, on the right side of the symbol is the darkness, right? This is the side where we go into our pain, where we go into the unconscious. And at the very bottom, at the water face, that's when the darkness is the greatest. That's when the pain is the greatest. And within the pain begins to sprout just at 6 o'clock. You'll see in this, at 6 o'clock begins to sprout, begins to grow the wood element. The wood element is about regeneration. It's about rebirth. It's about newness. It's what happens in springtime. And so from this darkness, we move into the light. And the two little dots in the yin yang symbol are very important. A lot of people don't know what these dots mean. So let's look at the bottom dot. So within this darkness, there's a white dot. That means that within darkness, there's always light. Okay, that is the seed of rebirth. Okay, so as we're in this terribly dark time right now, it means that we each within us and in the world and in the natural world is a seed of light, is a seed of regeneration. And by holding this light, by holding our love, by holding our compassion, by holding our intelligence, by staying present with the crisis, we can begin to birth something beautiful, which is on the left, which is yang. Not that the pain, the darkness is not beautiful, right? But it's not. Life is not enough just with darkness, right? Nor is it enough just with light. So that's what that white dot means. And then the black dot up near the fire element, that means that within yang, within the light, is a seed of darkness. So that whenever things are going great, whenever we have superfluity, when we have abundance, it means be careful. It means look. It means watch for decline, because if you grow too fast, you're going to fall, right? And so the object of yin yang and the object of balance and sustainability and regeneration is to not fall too far into the dark and not fall too far into the light. And Carol, if you could switch to the last image, which is the schedule of yin and yang. I just want to, this one. So I just want to take a minute. I'm going to drink some water and I'm going to invite everybody here just to look at these qualities, okay? The yang qualities are on the left, the yin qualities are on the right. And I want you to just look and reflect on your own life and in the world in which we live, and notice where you are at, but especially where our world is at. Where do you see our world in terms of yin and yang? Just meditate and look over these for a bit. Okay. So, Carol, if you could take that down, that'd be great. So as I look at that chart, and I imagine most people do, you'll see that the yang column is overabundant in our world, and the yin column is deficient. Okay, so that the yin column is also the feminine principle, not necessarily woman, because following the thinking of Jung and archetypal psychology, we each have masculine and feminine principles inside of us. So that yang column is tremendously exaggerated in our world. And what that means is that all that light, right, and all that warmth is in excess. So we can see global warming, climate change, and the warming of the seas, and the wildfires, and the anxiety which we have, and the frenetic pace with which we live our lives is an exacerbated yang experience. And so part of why I share the yin-yang dynamic is because it's a great tool, it's a great facet for which to step back from any picture at any time and understand an overarching dynamic of our times, to see this, because it helps guide and it helps inform us, and it helps spawn our intuition into ways that we can work. And it's like a North Star. It's a guiding symbol of our times. We can always place ourselves somewhere along that yin-yang continuum. And something that I'm always speaking out about, and Linda knows this, is black or white thinking. So black or white thinking happens when yin and yang separate, right? When there's no integration. At any point on that yin and yang circle, even at the apex and the nadir, is an aspect of gray by those two little dots that are in there. So there's always that the yin yang symbol is really a spectrum of gray. That's what it means. So, trying to remember what I was thinking about before I got onto the black or white thinking there. I can't remember. Okay. So this symbol, right? So the overview. Okay. So we can always place ourselves on that, and I think it's such an important metaphor for regeneration, right? So that regeneration happens by, the most simple example is in the garden, right? When you build the soil, when things decompose, when things die, it helps feed new life. And that's the important thing. And that happens inside us too as we go through psychological death and rebirth, right? So as we die to our pain, as we die to our difficulty, as we encounter and face the difficulties in the world and feel the feelings that accompany these events, we gain vision, we gain wisdom, and we gain insight into how to address them. So, Carol, if you could show the image of the 5 elements, I think it's the 3rd image that you have. Okay, let's do the other one. Maybe it's the 4th image. Yeah. Okay. So this is yin. These are the 5 elements, and this is yin and yang extrapolated. Before I get into this, Carol, can I ask you how we're doing on time? Because I'm going to adjust this presentation because I'm not sure I have enough time to get into all this.
We're at 6 minutes past, and we like to finish up at the bottom of the hour. So it depends on how much conversation you want, Jack.
At the bottom of the hours?
Yep. Yeah. So we'll finish at the end of the hour, right? At the 30. So at 11:30 or 1 or 2:30.
Okay, of that hour. Okay. Yep. So are you saying we have 25 minutes left?
Bingo.
Oh boy. All right. Take this image away, please. Just no time for this. I'm not sure what I have time left for. Okay. All right, let's bring this image back, please. And then I'm going to do a quick little surface treatment of it. And boy, all right. So these are the 5 phases. This is these outer arrows represent generation, right? So that's the yang phase. That's how things are built in the world. And this inner series of arrows is called the control cycle. So in the spirit of yin and yang, this is generation and degeneration, right? Building and decomposition. So that this always needs to be in balance. So you can't have constant progress, okay? So constant progress would be to keep building, keep progressing, and without the death cycle. So I just want to speak a bit about the emotions here. And so this model is a model of wholeness. So the ancient Chinese saw that all the cycles of all the seasons of the year create a wholeness, and the yearly cycle represents our own wholeness. So just as the seasons represent the wholeness of the natural world, they represent our own wholeness inside ourselves. So the beauty of holistic medicine and the holistic nature of this symbolism here is that these things occur in the world and they occur in ourselves, so that we can access the wisdom and the balance and the dynamics of the outer world by accessing ourselves, and vice versa. We can observe and be connected with the outer world and recognize the wisdom for our own lives. So the ancient Chinese realized that up here at the top at 12 o'clock, the emotion associated with the fire element is joy. And with earth, it's worry, but I like to, for our sake right now, focus on reflection, right? So that's the pause. That's when you're speaking to someone, pausing. When I'm presenting, pausing. So this is the pausing between events in life so that we can take account of what's happening. We can reflect, and this aspect of self-reflection is so important. And it's why in the image Carol showed before, the earth was at the center, right? This is a different pictogram of the 5 elements, and both were used at different times in Chinese medicine history. So the metal element corresponds with grief. And you'll notice that this side here, so the earth and metal and water, this is the yin side. This is the dark side, right? So worry, reflection, these are all starting to move inward. Grief is inward and sinking. Fear is the deepest. And then we're birthed onto the other side in wood and fire. But anyway, water here at the nadir of the yin swish, the black swish, we have the emotion of fear. And I'll just say briefly that I think that especially lately, as I watch what's happened during COVID, and especially with the climate crisis, and what I just described before, I think fear is such a pivot point. It is perhaps the most profound pivot point. I could almost attribute the climate crisis, the COVID crisis, the political crisis to fear and how we work with fear. And it's and on social media, you'll find that people just have this black or white view of fear. It's like, oh, don't live in fear, right? Or they're so overwhelmed with fear, they're paralyzed. And so that's where emotional intelligence comes in. And I have a whole chapter in the book on working with fear, and then a whole chapter on working with anxiety, and how you really have to, the devil is really in the details here, and working with fear, learning what is helpful fear, what is unhelpful fear, what fears do we challenge, how do we regulate ourselves somatically as we encounter fear. All of this in the book, and all of this is very, very crucial. And I could spend hours talking about fear and how it shows up, and its most perverse and dysfunctional manifestation in our world today, especially in the COVID crisis, is a fear of fear. So when people fear, the people that say, oh, don't live in fear, I don't want to live in fear, oh, that's fear-based, that is disease. That is the epitome, that is the crux of disease. We have to pay attention to fear, not only to protect ourselves by wearing masks or social distancing or sheltering at home, right? And we see that the people that denigrate and that disparage fear are the ones out there spreading the freaking disease. So fear of fear is tremendously problematic. Anyway, so, and then we have the wood and the creativity of the wood phase. This is the rebirth part. After we've contemplated fear, after we've worked with fear and helped ourselves come out. I'm going to pause a second. I'm going to stop talking very soon because I really want to get to questions. Let me just see if there's anything super important I have to say. Okay. I just want to conclude by saying that model that we just saw, the 5 elements, that's a model of wholeness. And so It means that we need all of those emotions. We need all of those qualities. And we cannot do away with grief. We cannot do away with joy. We cannot do away with anger. We cannot do away with fear. So we need all of them. And the Chinese, because of their culture, they say, have all those emotions in balance. I remember when I was in clinic at school, one of the supervisors was telling me, you feel too much. You feel too much. You can't cry so much. And I just knew that I needed to cry that much at that time. So I've kind of adjusted this for a more Western mindset, in the sense that when we embrace all these emotions, when we embrace our grief, when we embrace fear, we have to work with each one differently and specifically. So there's a separate set of intelligence tools to work with fear. There's a separate set of intelligence tools to work with anxiety, to work with grief, right? So that we don't, it's like keeping one foot in regulation, one foot in the mud, so that we don't go off the deep end and fly off the wheel of yin and yang. So a lot of that's discussed in the book. So I am going to stop now and thank you for your attention. And I had to cut things a bit short. So I'll leave it at that. And I welcome any questions.